Kids, if you'd like to go back with Mr. Bobby, if we have any this morning that would like to do that. We have a few people out today, so we might just have our older crew. So Bobby, if you can go back and teach yourself, that would be great. The rest of us, if we can open our Bibles to the book of Matthew. We're going to continue in our series, book of Matthew, chapter 5. So as we get into the rest of our series, we're understanding our theme, and we are understanding our, from week to week, we're understanding the next verse. We know what we're doing. We know what we're going into. But I want to invite you as we begin this morning that we take the application of this, that we take the principles drawn and we apply them to our life. They're not simply things that we learned about a text that we might have known in the past, but we take the truths that are found in it and we apply them to ourselves. And so I'd like you to think about taking notes in a certain way today. I have notes up here. As a matter of fact, if it's difficult for you to read the slides, I've tried to make them bolder this week. I've made a version where I could print them out, and I printed out copies and gave them. If you need those, let me know. Each week I'll bring a copy for you. Okay, but those notes are up there, and I can give them to you. What I want you to do is to think through the implications for your life. So we have the slide up here, and we have the slide every week for a reason. Why are scriptures to be taught? So that we might respond more clearly and more accurately, more passionately to the knowledge of God in His Word. And so as we look at what He says in His Word, we take it to heart, and we say, and we plead before God, change me, mold me, make me. And so with that, I would invite you in Matthew chapter 5 to read with me in Matthew chapter 5. We're just going to read through the first 5 verses this morning to set our context. Seeing the crowds, He went up on the mountain, and when He sat down, His disciples came to Him. This is called the Sermon on the Mount, right? And He opened His mouth and taught them, saying, He starts these 2 chapters with what we are studying. That is, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And our text today, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. But I've challenged you as today already to take notes about what is the truth and how do I respond, right? So that would be a great way. True statement, my response. True statement, my response. Matter of fact, for a number of years, that's how I would do my devotion time, is I would pull one true statement, and then how am I going to respond? And I would encourage you to do that this morning. But I have been encouraging you to memorize, okay? And so what we're going to do, we're going to read this together. What's going to be happening next week, though, I'm warning you, I kind of told you that we might end up having verses, like, it's going to get too long. Well, I'm going to start leaving words out, like little blanks for us to fill in, okay? Because in 4 weeks from now, we're going to have this all memorized together. But today, let's read this all together, and then next week, we're going to memorize what we're studying today. Read it out loud with me, if you would. Matthew 5, 1 through 4. Seeing the crowds, He went up on the mountain, and when He sat down, His disciples came to Him. And He opened His mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So we're going to continue memorizing, and again, next week you're going to be missing some words, so you have to make sure that you keep up on this. But for today, as we jump into our passage, Matthew chapter 5, and our text of verse number 5, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. From this text, what we want to do is pull this idea that Jesus Christ Himself has given us His own word, that we will inherit Those who are meek will inherit. So there's an inheritance for the meek. And what I'd like us to do, as we have done each week and you're prepared for, we're going to look at the blessed and then the promise, the blessed statement and then the promise. But before we do that, why is this applicable? I told you we're going to have 3 slides every week so that we can understand what we even mean by blessed, right? If you weren't here before, maybe you missed this part. When we say bless you, in this context, we mean something completely different than the bless you that someone might say after you sneeze. Or bless your heart from the South, right? This is a different kind of blessing. This is an authentic, deep, abiding joy. What it is not is just a temporary happiness. It's not something that's simply found in the here and now, and it's not based upon circumstance. But it's the demonstration of God's favor that brings to us deep and abiding joy, regardless of the scenario, the situation, the time, the age, whatever you want to fill in the blank. It's a deep, abiding joy. It's that state of knowing that you are in God's favor. It's independent of all the conditions, whatever that blank is outside. And so understanding that's what we are talking about. And so as we move and think about that concept, we have to think about the immediate context. And that is that he's giving this Sermon on the Mount, and he's talking, and he'll go on for the next couple chapters in this sermon that has similarities to the Sermon on the Plain that you'd find in Luke, where there's a present reality of this kingdom living. Present reality of this kingdom living, but there's a future fulfillment. And we're using this understanding of this today, future, and how there's a progression even in it. Today, we are transformed into his image. But that will be fully expressed in a millennial kingdom. We shall be like him, it says in 1 John 3:2. But we're progressively growing into Christ's likeness. We're being conformed into the image of his Son. So we have transformation, but we will one day be there, but there's progress to it. There's progressive aspects to this fulfillment. So there's an already aspect to this, and then there's a not yet there. And I would like you to view that as we thought about, and we've applied this in the same way to each of these blessed statements. The present implications and application with a future fulfillment and mindset towards the future. And that applies to us in our present passage. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And so that's where we're at in this continuum. These work together in this series. You could see that as we look at this first kingdom one, the poor in spirit, we're recognizing, think about it in this regard, we're recognizing our spiritual bankruptcy. Poor in spirit, those who mourn, the appropriate grief. We talk to the condition of the world and to my sin. So you have the bankruptcy, grief. You have the humility, the repentance, and then we're going to see today the surrender, the submitting ourselves to the way that God has for us. We are submitting ourselves, but the posture that we have as we go through these Beatitudes is one of seeing Christ as the one giving the approval. Christ is the one giving us the state of eternal joy in the present and in the future. So let's look a little bit at what this meekness means and this meekness is. So the blessed statement, the meek. Our definition for this that we're operating off of. Many times it's used interchangeably in some contexts with humility, the same concept. But look at the first part of this definition from two different sources. Controlled strength. A controlled strength. Now, think about the difference between what this means and what it is not. It is not weakness. When you say that you are meek, you are not saying weak. My daughters rescued a kitten like a week and a half ago. And so it's in our house. They've been nurturing it, and we've taken it to the vet. We're giving it medicine. We're doing all this. A couple-week-old kitty cat that was found on the side of the road. And they brought it in, and one of those do it and then ask for permission later type of thing. But how can you say, no, go put it back on the street, right? That's not going to happen. I do have a heart. It's very small in regards to these cats, but I've never had a cat. I've never, ever been in a context where I've had a cat stay in my presence overnight anywhere, okay? My perspective of cats are the opposite of meekness. They are weak, but they think they're strong, right? And so the first thing that this cat is doing to us is, to me, is you get close, it would do this little hissing, right? And naturally, it's been out in the elements. It doesn't know. It needs to be taken care of and all of that. But what that cat actually was doing that from a posture of weakness and trying to show strength, where meekness is having the weakness, knowing the weakness. All right? When she has that, having strength and showing the weakness. Showing, not weakness, I'm sorry, showing humility, showing softness, showing gentleness, another word that's used in the same domantic range as this word. So now the cat will come up and still hiss every once in a while, but it softens itself up to you. It has more of a posture of strength as it's been able to walk. And so we are giving that cat to another household. I just want to put that out there for the record, and it is on video now, so we can't go back. All right. So the idea is that we're not talking about weakness. We're not talking about there's absolutely no strength found in whoever is demonstrating meekness. It's actually there is strength, but it's the ability to control that. It's the ability to set it in a context of humility. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. So it's not a weakness. It's and in that Leon Morris had said, he's in regards to this passage in his commentary, Pillar New Testament commentary, he says, and I quote, "Meekness is not to be confused with weakness. The meek are not simply submissive because they lack the resources to be anything else." See, we have great riches, it says, in Christ Jesus. He says to take on ourselves his burden, for us to give him our burden. The meek are not simply submissive because they lack the resources to be anything else. And so what meekness isn't is weakness. It's not also just a lack of conviction saying, I don't care about this. And it's not having inability. It's not having the inability to stand up when you need to stand up. It's not the inability to be able to say, I need to operate and I need to stand firm in the face of false prophets, as the scriptures indicate, in the face of those who would speak ill of Christ and standing up for truth. Meekness is not these things, but what is this meekness? How is it demonstrated in in the scriptures. And so with that, we're going to look at two different approaches to meekness. Look at this meekness in action. And think about it in regards to kingdom, because we did that in the first week. We juxtaposed or put things in alignment to be able to compare them. That's what we did. Are doing the same thing right now. The world and the kingdom. What are the difference of approaches to having the strength? And so what would the world say? They would say, whenever you have the ability to do it, you should do it. You stand up. You assert yourself. You demand your rights. Where you get even with someone. But if you can, it's me first. So the best illustration of that is maybe something that you've seen on the news over the last day or so. So I was reading the news from the only news outlet that you should go to is X, apparently. No, I don't know where you get news anymore because that just has everybody's opinion of everything. But I'm hearing about this story from the US Open where the tennis player had his hat and he was giving it to a young boy in the stand, and a man came up and grabbed it before the boy could get it, and the boy's like, and he goes and puts it in his bag. Well, as anything that you do that's on video, and it was actually being videotaped by the broadcast, and they were talking about him, and everyone's watching this adult take this hat before the boy could grab it. Social media found out who the man was, and as he's the CEO of this big company that actually supports part of the tournament, everyone is going to town on this company now, right? And now you're all gonna, don't look at it now, you're all finding your phones, you're gonna, like, I wanna hear about this story, right? But one of his responses, so I read in the factual, where all your news is truthful social media, okay, I said that without any accuracy at all. But the mindset, so this could be true or not, that's what I'm trying to say, but this is the illustration, is that the response was, this is the, yeah, I acknowledge I took this, but like anything in life, you have to act fast and take care of yourself. Paraphrasing. The idea that, yeah, this is how you get ahead in life is what he was indicating. Well, we'll see how that fares if that is true in that situation, but that is the world's mentality. That is a counterfactual to the truth that Christ says in the meekness that we are to have in our present reality on this earth. The kingdom says not just assert yourself, but he says submit to God. Instead of getting even, that person did this to me, instead of saying getting even, the kingdom ethic says show grace. The world sees strength as the purpose and the goal is self-promotion. If you can have strength, you get strength so that you can promote self. The kingdom says the more strength that you give, the more that you can serve others. There's a difference here between when we say humility and meekness and the ability to control strength founded in the scriptures, as opposed to when we say the world system is what we're talking about. So characteristics of the meek. These characteristics, I want you to look at these. I had them listed out because we're not going to spend a lot of time here. We're going to keep going. Characteristics of the strength. Look at this. Here are some passages. Proverbs 15:1. We would have our children memorize this verse when they were young. A gentle answer turns away wrath. Right? Thinking before reacting, this controlled response. A gentle answer. Should you be mad? Do you have the right to be mad? Maybe. But you can see how this characteristic is demonstrated in the scriptures. In Galatians 1, this idea of correction, restoring one in the spirit of gentleness. Someone has gone and sinned and has been repenting and is trying to reconcile, in the sense, how do we approach someone in that scenario? The posture is gentleness. Is the right? Have they ruined or hurt? And do they have the right to have reconciliation? No, the idea is that grace has been shown. This can apply, as we think, in a number of contexts, even from work to marriages. In Philippians, let your gentleness, right, be made known to all, as in the ESV says. You want it to be seen. When people see you, they see the evidence of gentleness. And what is that posture of true understanding and wisdom, that posture of strength in the knowledge and the application? Is that it has a component of gentle. That's what God's wisdom shows in our lives, an attitude of gentleness. So whether it would be in marriage, whether it would be in parenting, whether it would be in some aspect of leadership that you might have at work or somewhere else, exercising authority with humility, in conflict, responding with grace and not reacting. We have some illustrations of this, some great application really for us. As we've talked about, and I want to reiterate, as we look at Old Testament people, they can be examples of biblical truth. They are not the models. We don't do character studies because we want to be Moses. We want to be what Christ wants us to be. And many times he has characters throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament that demonstrate those characteristics. Even as Paul had said, follow me as I follow Christ. And so we have actually, this is the passage where this would have had an Old Testament representation. This is the passage that basically takes Matthew chapter 5 and puts it in from the Old Testament. It's quoting in the original promise from Psalm 37. It says, but the meek shall inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant prosperity. The same concept. But the meek shall inherit the land and delight themselves in the abundant prosperity. So Jesus quoting, using this from the Psalms. But the context is beyond that. We look at other illustrations of truth. We're going to look at Christ here in a moment. But Moses, as we've read through, as Pastor Tim has taught through much of the Pentateuch related to Moses and the children of Israel. But Numbers 12:3 says this. It says, now the man Moses says he was weak. He was very weak, more than all the people that were on the face of the earth. Moses, in his meekness, had learned to be meek and approaching God, not reacting just by killing the Egyptian in the moment. He's a leader of 2 million people. Stood up and faced Pharaoh. Those are not signs of weakness. But he has submitted himself to God. Even as flawed as Moses was, and he paints a picture of himself in those first 5 books of the Bible, as there's wrote, and then Moses comes on the scene, right, in Exodus. He doesn't paint himself in the best light always. Struck a rock he shouldn't have struck. Killed a guy he shouldn't have killed, right? responded, but in so many scenarios where God says, I can start with the new people, Moses. His posture was that of, no, God, don't do this. Spare the people. Chose restraint. He submitted himself to God. Another example that we brought up was from David last week. But before that Bathsheba moment, David was wandering before he became king. David was ostracized in the sense with his men having to stay away from Saul because Saul wanted to kill him. And specifically, Saul's general, right, was like, hey, Saul, I think I know where David is. We should go get him. But in 1 Samuel 24 and 26, you see where David could have actually killed Saul two different times. Could have killed Saul two different times. Like he's hiding from Saul. He knows they're up in, just picture yourselves, a picture of David and his men up in the like Daisy Mountain type of area, right? Like some hillish area, and him going and hiding in a cave. Well, lo and behold, Saul shows up in the cave, and that's where he's resting, in the cave that David is hiding in. And what does this guy say? Hey, now you can kill him. You could take care of him right here and there. David showed restraint, and even by cutting off a piece of fabric from Saul's clothes, later on you read of David saying, I have done wrong. I shouldn't have touched, he says, the anointed. The posture of meekness. David had the strength. David had the ability to do that. But he says, this was not right for me to do. He had the power, and the men around him urged him to do it. In the face of pressure, he still was able to show control. He was able to follow and submit himself to what he knew God demanded of him. But then we get to the greatest example as Christ himself. Jesus, our example, shows this meekness. He even says that of himself in Matthew 11:29. I am gentle and lowly in heart. Same word here from our word meek, same word used, same Greek word. He says, I'm gentle and lowly in heart. And remember, it's not from a posture of weakness. Christ could have done anything that he wanted. Even Satan tempting him. Prior to Matthew chapter 5, like you can call down angels. You could do whatever. You should be delivered from this. And God, Jesus Christ, with all omnipotence and all power, while he was here on earth, chose to live gentle and lowly in heart. Sure, he cleansed the temple. He had a posture of strength. He confronted those who taught wrong, the Pharisees. But he was in perfect submission to the Father. He had that strength under control. Think of trial. Oh, it was up there. I thought I had to click again. I'm sorry. Think of the trial before Pilate, right? Just the silent. And I had listened to this again this last week, just where he's not responding. And when he does say, he says, well, you say so. He says, Matthew 20 in Matthew 23, whoever humbles himself will be exalted, right? Whoever exalts himself, King James says, will be abased or will be brought low. Paul indicates in the person of Christ Jesus and the gospel that Jesus had brought, not this establishing of the kingdom that would come and would dominate at that moment and would put everything into submission at that moment, but it came in, remember, the weakness, or in gentleness and lowly in heart. Paul says God chose what is weak to shame the strong, and that his power is made perfect in weakness. See, this is a motif that is found. This is a theme that is found throughout the scriptures, in Old Testament examples, in the very words of Christ, and then in the encouragement in the epistles that come from Paul. We are to inherit the earth because, why? His grace is sufficient. I was on the right slide, I'm sorry. In the promises. So he promises to help us for us to inherit the earth. And the promise is to the humble in all of these scenarios. The promise is that he will give us the grace. The promise is that God chose what is weak to shame the strong, that he will exalt us. Humble yourselves and he will exalt you. These are the promises that God gave. This is the blessedness that we are speaking of. He's promised us that we will inherit the earth, but this promise is to the humble. It's to you and to I. So what does it mean to have promises to the promises that they will inherit the earth? Remember the present and the future. We're going to look at both aspects, the reality of the present inheritance. And what will the meek receive now? What will those who are meek receive? According to scriptures that we've just read, and others like the brother of Christ, in James 4:6, it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Those who are meek, God says, I'm on your side. I am for you. I will give you grace. He's promised to give us peace. Why? Because in the moment that we realize that we need him, and that he has given us all that pertains to life and godliness, we realize that all that pertains to life and godliness is because it comes from him. And so in humility, we come before God, and he's promised to give us peace. The relational aspects. God promises, as he indicates in these passages, to be able to give us, as God's humble vessels, the ability to influence our world and those around us, spiritual authority. See, what Jesus didn't say is he came and he talked about this progressive kingdom, this kingdom that will come, but how we live in this present life. He did not promise his disciples that what will happen is that they will take over Rome, that they will put to rest the Old Testament teachers that were the Pharisees and the Sadducees. No, more so God told them that they were going to face the opposition from them. So he says, I give grace to the humble. It's not those who can dominate that give God's present favor. It's those who in meekness submit themselves in gentleness, being used as humble vessels for God's service. So there's a present aspect to this, but there's a future aspect to this. God does promise the inheritance of the earth. Revelation 20, verse 6, they will reign with him. It's talking about those saints that come, right? Remember, we talked last week about, we pulled in a future passage from Revelation 21, but Revelation 20 here, it says, they will reign with him. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 2. He's indicating the saints will judge the earth. Matthew 19 and Luke 22, talking about his disciples and indications of the kingdom here. The idea that the kingdom is in God's hands and that we are kingdom saints. Christ will come back. Christ will conquer. But he says to us, be gentle. He says to us, be meek. Being a kingdom saint, a kingdom citizen in this present age does not mean that I lord over or rule over. It means that I demonstrate meekness. So how am I to live as a kingdom saint today? How am I to kingdom meek today? Okay, I'm making it a verb. How am I to, and I've missed two as well. How am I kingdom meek? I'm sorry, it's not a verb. How am I kingdom meek today? How am I demonstrating this? We've already talked about the areas, indicated the areas of life that you have some ownership over. You might be a dad here and have some leadership over your children. But do you lead by serving? Now, don't get me wrong, dads and children, you should hear this too. It's good enough to say, this is what I said, these are the rules, this is why it needs to happen. That's how we have to establish parameters and guards around our family, mom and dad. But do we seek opportunities to serve? You know, when it's one of the kids' weeks as they rotate their chores and it's 1 week to do all the dishes, as a dad, I will go and I will do one dish a week. Okay, that's not really that servant, isn't it? Okay, I have my children nodding their head, right? But do you look for opportunities to serve? So meekness is in leadership, meek leadership. Do we admit our mistakes? Or are we walking around like the abandoned kitten, hissing at everyone around us because really underneath we're responding from a posture of weakness? And disagreements. When correction needs to happen. You know, so there's this phrase that's used, speak truth in love. You read that somewhere? What kind of heart attitude do we go towards our brothers and sisters in Christ when there's disagreements? Our familial relationships, our children to your parents. You can control your response to disagreements. You can't always control all of the disagreement. You can't control the way that it will end out. But what is your heart posture? I know I'm right. I'm not going to let you get a word in. And we do that thing what's called hear to respond, not listening to understand. We're listening so I know how I can trump this person. Meekness demonstrates itself in real life scenarios. As we think of our families, our leadership roles, as we think about just having disagreements among one another. We mentioned, and we'll just go over the job scenario. You might oversee multiple people. You might be a teacher with multiple kids and you have too many kids in your classroom. But how do you have excellence without arrogance? How do we live a life of character integrity when we have pressure, integrity or character under pressure. And then in every area of our home. You know what meekness is as well lives, it demonstrates even in our home and in these other scenarios is when we have a posture, a mindset, an inward reality of meekness, it, it results in us actually living sacrificially. How can I help this person? What can I do for them? And I know my kids are going to make me do the dishes now, whoever's week it is. I think it's Bobby's, right? Okay. I'll help you with the one dish today. But it makes you think differently and you see new opportunities. How can I be a blessing to this person? That's the posture of someone that was responding out of strength in a biblical way is how can I serve? How can I on the job and home and disagreements? We're memorizing this verse and we have an application, 2 questions we're going to pause and I'm going to ask you to think about as we close. But next week, if you can memorize verse number 5, okay, and we're going to add, and I'm going to have some blanks in there. But taking all this aside, looking at the notes that you might have taken, how can I respond? What's the truth? I want you to think about these 2 questions. We're going to pause and then I'm going to pray. What situations challenge my ability to be meek? There's a couple components as I worded that, specifically this way. Because everybody has their own, that thing that pushes them, their own button, right? When people show me disrespect, I'm going to respond with disrespect. When people don't show me lovingness, well, I'm not going to be loving. I have the ability to show love and I'm not going to. We don't say that. Those areas in our life push us in those responses. So what do we need to really identify those areas and repent those areas and ask God to have spirit control? How do we submit ourselves to the work of the Holy Spirit in the spirit of gentleness from Galatians 5? Identifying what areas am I prone to struggle in meekness. And then secondly, how am I demonstrating strength under controls in my areas? So what pushes my button? But in what areas am I demonstrating this? And how might I let that affect the rest of my responses in other scenarios? So I would like us to think about this passage. I would like us to think about the promise that we have an inheritance in the future, but God has promised to exalt those who are gentle, those who demonstrate a weakness, even though they have the strength. And I would ask you to bow your heads and pray with me, and then I will close with us all together. Father, there are so many areas in my life um, that I'm proud of, that drive the view of myself to see myself